All right. So are you ready to jump into some serious political craziness?
Always.
Okay, good. Because, you really want to understand what's going on in American politics right now, especially just 1 month into this whole Trump-Vance administration thing. So we're going to take this deep dive into VP J.D. Vance's speech at CPAC 2025. And let me tell you, this speech is not your typical boring policy stuff. It's lively, it's super provocative, and honestly, there were moments where I was just like, what is even happening? I mean, we're talking about claims of surpassing Biden's accomplishments in just 30 days and Dogecoin saving taxpayer money.
Oh, I know, right?
What does that even mean? And then some really wild comparisons to other countries.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride.
I'm ready.
Okay, good.
So what really struck me right away was the timing of this whole thing. Vance gives this speech right after this crazy trip to France, Germany, and then San Diego.
San Diego.
Yes, San Diego. I mean, he's obviously playing up the whole jet lag thing, but there's this underlying feeling that he needs to, get things moving right away.
Yeah, he's not just tired, he's on a mission.
Totally.
He keeps talking about this historical mandate that they got from the American people, and he just keeps focusing on the border, the economy.
Of course.
And, government spending, all the classics.
Exactly. He's talking directly to his base and reminding them about all those important things they care about.
Yeah.
And then there's that little jab at CNN saying that they have fewer viewers than Trump has signed executive orders.
Oh, yeah.
It's like he's saying, look, we're the ones in charge now, and we're not going to be afraid to shake things up.
He definitely doesn't hold back, especially when it comes to immigration. Vance actually says that border crossings have gone down by 90%.
Wow.
In just 1 month. I mean, that's a huge claim.
It is.
I don't even know how you measure something like that. But, it's definitely designed to show that they're taking action and that they're strong on an issue that his supporters really care about.
And it doesn't stop there. He goes on to call drug cartels terrorist organizations.
Wow.
Which, really ramps up the rhetoric and could even mean that they're planning to take more aggressive steps against them.
Right.
And then he speaks directly to the angel families, those who've lost loved ones because of illegal immigration.
Right.
And he offers them his condolences and promises to prevent these tragedies from happening again.
Yeah.
It's a very calculated way to use emotion to strengthen their stance on border security.
For sure. And then there's the economy. Vance admits that they inherited a total inflation crisis from the Biden administration. But this is where things get interesting. He compares fixing the economy to rebuilding a house that's been burned down.
Oh, wow.
Basically implying that it's going to take time to see any real progress.
He's trying to buy himself some time.
Yeah, and he's also kind of suggesting that it's all the previous administration's fault for the mess they're in now. It's actually a pretty clever way to manage expectations while still promising a better future.
It's that classic move. Blame the people who came before you to buy yourself some time to put your own plans in place.
Exactly. But it's also a way to shift the conversation from short-term pain to long-term gain. Vance emphasizes that they're all about safety and prosperity, and especially about making sure that America is a place where future generations can actually afford to live.
That's got to resonate with a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with so many people struggling with how expensive everything is these days.
For sure.
And how does he say they'll make things more affordable? By unleashing American energy, he just keeps hammering home this point that becoming energy independent is the only way to bring prices down.
Oh, yeah.
From groceries to gas, you name it.
It's a familiar line from conservatives, isn't it?
Oh, totally. And it's one that's sure to get a lot of cheers from their base.
Definitely. But Vance doesn't stop at energy. He also throws in some of those classic conservative talking points about being responsible with money. He calls for tax cuts and cutting what he calls garbage from the budget.
Right.
It's a clear sign that the Trump-Vance administration is sticking to their usual approach when it comes to the economy.
Yep. And then things get really interesting when Vance starts talking about how they plan to get things done in Congress. He says that Trump wants to do this one big comprehensive reconciliation bill.
Hold on. A what?
A reconciliation bill. It's basically a special way of doing things in the Senate that lets them pass some bills with a simple majority, which means they can avoid a filibuster.
So they could potentially get their entire agenda through without needing 60 votes.
Exactly. It's super risky.
Yeah.
But it could also be a really powerful move.
That's a huge gamble.
So what's in this massive bill? Well, it seems like just about everything. unleashing American energy, putting tariffs in place, making those Trump tax cuts permanent, extending them. And he even specifically mentions no taxes on tips.
No taxes on tips.
I know, right? That definitely caught my attention too.
Wow.
And then, of course, there's a whole section all about securing the border for the long term. It's ambitious, to say the least.
Ambitious is an understatement. I mean, the scope of what they're trying to do is incredible. This one bill strategy shows that they're willing to go all in on their priorities and really use all their political power right from the start.
Yeah.
It also tells me they know Congress is going to push back and they're ready for a fight.
And Vance is definitely not shy about linking things that don't seem related at all. He connects border control with being responsible about government spending, arguing that if they crack down on immigration, it'll help stop fraud with Medicare and Social Security.
Interesting.
It's a way to tap into people's worries about government waste while also pushing their agenda on immigration.
It's smart. It creates a sense of urgency and makes people feel like these issues are all connected.
Yeah.
It's also a way to appeal to different groups of their supporters by addressing both economic and social anxieties.
And, it's not just domestic policy that Vance gets into. He jumps right into the world of international affairs. And let me tell you, he really makes some waves, especially with his speech at the Munich Security Conference. This was more than just a friendly meet and greet.
Yeah.
This was a statement. He just comes out and says that mass migration is the biggest threat that Europe and the U.S. are facing.
Wow.
Claiming that letting in all these unvetted foreign migrants is going to completely undermine Western civilization and our sovereignty.
I bet that went over well.
Oh, yeah. You can imagine the looks on the faces of those European leaders.
Yeah, that's a direct challenge to that whole globalist worldview that a lot of European leaders have.
Right.
It also feels like a sign that U.S. foreign policy could be changing.
How so?
Well, moving away from working with other countries and going back to this more nationalist America First approach.
And he doesn't stop there. He goes on to talk about free speech and how he thinks the Biden approach was all about silencing people who disagree. And then he compares that to what he calls the Trump approach, which is all about encouraging open discussion and protecting national sovereignty.
So they're trying to paint themselves as the defenders of free speech.
Exactly. Even though they've been accused of being intolerant and using divisive rhetoric.
It's clever, but also kind of dangerous. Don't you think?
So.
Well, they're basically saying that their controversial views are the same thing as free speech, which could make it easier for extremist ideas to spread.
Right. Then Vance switches gears and starts talking about how important shared values are for strong alliances.
Okay.
But he uses this very specific example. He brings up how Germany relies on American taxpayers for defense.
Right.
And then he asks if that's really sustainable if Germany keeps punishing people for mean tweets.
So he's taking a jab at Germany's hate speech laws.
Totally. And it's a pretty clear sign that the Trump-Vance administration isn't afraid to use its power to push their own values on the rest of the world.
That's a big change from how the U.S. has usually done things. I mean, they've always tried to avoid linking defense agreements to specific domestic policies.
Yeah.
This feels a lot more transactional. They're saying, we'll support you, but only if you agree with us on these specific things.
And of course, he can't avoid the whole Russia-Ukraine situation. He goes right into how the Trump administration is handling those peace negotiations.
Oh, boy.
Emphasizing how Trump always keeps his options open and makes sure there's direct communication with everyone involved, even Russia.
Some people might see that as Trump going back to his unpredictable ways with foreign policy.
For sure.
But Vance spins it as this bold move that's absolutely necessary to end the war.
It's a high-stakes game, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It could lead to a breakthrough, or it could completely backfire.
I mean, Trump's willingness to talk to America's enemies has always been controversial.
Yeah.
And this is no different. We'll just have to wait and see if his methods actually work.
Only time will tell.
And then Vance does something completely unexpected. He starts talking about the hostages that were recently released after that Hamas attack we talked about earlier.
Oh, right.
He's obviously happy about the 2 hostages who were freed. And he sends this really heartfelt message of support to the families who are still waiting for their loved ones to come home.
It's a tough situation for sure.
He even tells this story about a friend who asked him about the difference between how the Biden and Trump administrations handled hostage releases.
I'm sure there's a point to that story.
Oh, yeah. It's a very deliberate way to show that they're committed to bringing Americans home and to contrast their approach with what the previous administration did.
So they're trying to show that they're competent and effective on the world stage.
Exactly. He says that their success is all thanks to Trump's leadership and how he gets personally involved.
Makes sense.
Contrasting that with what he sees as a lack of focus from the previous administration. He even says that Trump gave Steve Witkoff, who's his friend and kind of like an emissary, the authority to get those hostages released, which shows just how involved the president was in this whole thing.
It's interesting to get a look behind the scenes like that.
And to see how personal relationships play a role in their decisions.
Oh,
Okay. Now, get ready for this, because Vance goes straight into another topic that's going to get some strong reactions, especially from the CPAC audience.
what's that?
He reaffirms their total commitment to being pro-life.
Of course.
And praises Trump as the most pro-life president in American history.
Well, that's surprising.
He talks about Roe v. Wade being overturned and the abortion issue going back to the states as major victories.
It's a surefire way to get those conservative voters excited.
And it shows that they're going to keep pushing for even stricter abortion laws, which means we could see even more legal and political battles over this issue.
It's definitely a hot-button topic.
But Vance doesn't just talk about the legal stuff. He also stresses how important it is to persuade people to change their minds about abortion.
Oh, interesting.
Urging Americans to see unborn life as sacred and worth protecting. He hints at some of their goals, like supporting crisis pregnancy centers and making it less expensive to raise a family.
It's like a two-pronged approach, trying to change both the laws and people's minds.
Exactly. And it reflects the long-term goals of the pro-life movement, which is to not only make abortion illegal, but to also change how society views it.
So by framing it as cherishing life and supporting families,
Right.
they're hoping to appeal to more than just their core base.
Exactly.
And create a society where abortion is not only against the law, but it's something people wouldn't even consider.
Vance finishes this part by urging everyone to see babies as blessings, not inconveniences.
Oh.
Which is a message that really hits home with this crowd and strengthens their dedication to the anti-abortion cause.
It's a very emotional appeal.
For sure.
And a key part of their pro-life messaging.
Yeah. By talking about protecting innocent life and the joys of being a parent, they're tapping into people's deepest values and creating this feeling that we have to act now.
They want people to feel like it's a moral imperative.
And then Vance gets more personal. He starts talking about his own Christian faith and how deeply it's impacted his life and work.
Okay.
He talks about the main beliefs of Christianity, especially the death and resurrection of Jesus, and how that shapes his views on life and death.
That's not something you hear politicians talk about very often.
It's true. It's like we're getting a glimpse into his personal beliefs and how they influence his political views.
Which is interesting because the connection between religion and politics is a powerful force in America.
Oh, absolutely. Especially for conservative voters.
Right. So by bringing up his Christian faith,
Yeah.
Vance is connecting with those shared values and making his policies seem more legitimate within that framework.
He links his faith directly to his political goals, saying that he wants to build a society where his kids can grow up as virtuous Christians.
Okay.
And he mentions how Christianity has survived tough times throughout history.
It's like he's drawing a parallel between his faith and the challenges America is facing right now.
Yeah, suggesting that faith can give you strength and guidance when things are uncertain. Which definitely resonates with the anxieties a lot of Americans are feeling.
Especially those who feel like traditional values and institutions are under attack.
Exactly. By talking about the power of faith, Vance is offering a message of hope and suggesting that even when things are bad, faith can show us the way forward.
It's a message that can be very comforting in times of uncertainty.
All right, get ready for this one. Vance then takes it a step further and says he believes in distinct roles for men and women.
Okay.
And he criticizes what he sees as pressure to suppress masculinity, even using the phrase androgynous idiots to describe people who support gender fluidity.
Whoa, that's pretty provocative.
Yeah, it's definitely going to spark some debate and turn some people off. But it also speaks directly to a group of conservatives who are worried about changing gender roles and see it as an attack on traditional masculinity.
It taps into this broader anxiety about gender and how the lines are blurring. It reflects a view that sees traditional masculinity as something that's under threat and needs to be defended.
Then Vance turns his attention to young people, emphasizing how committed the administration is to their future. He talks about making it easier to buy a home, providing good jobs, and letting them raise families according to their values.
It's a message of hope and opportunity.
Especially for people under 30 who are going to be dealing with the consequences of these policies for years to come.
And it's a smart move to appeal to younger voters.
Why is that?
Because they're becoming more and more influential in politics. by addressing their concerns about jobs and family values.
Yeah.
Vance is hoping to build a strong base of support among the next generation.
But he doesn't just make promises. He tells young people they need to get involved, make their voices heard, and fight for the future they want.
He wants them to take action.
Yeah, to actually get out there and do something, especially in the upcoming elections.
Makes sense. I mean, a lot of young people are disillusioned with politics these days.
Totally. So he's trying to channel that frustration into political action.
And hopefully get them to vote for his agenda.
Then he has this really specific message for young men.
Yeah.
He tells them to be proud of their masculinity and not let themselves be influenced by what he sees as this overly feminized culture.
Interesting.
He even says that Trump is a good example of this kind of authentic self-expression.
Because Trump's never afraid to say what he thinks.
Exactly. He praises Trump for not caring what people think and always speaking his mind, which is a message that's probably going to appeal to some young men.
Yeah, but it could also reinforce those harmful stereotypes about masculinity.
Right. It's a tough line to walk.
Definitely.
And speaking of walking a fine line, Vance brings up his wife, Usha Vance.
The second lady.
Yeah, he shares some stories about her and talks about the advice she's given him. Apparently, she thinks he should tone it down a bit on social media.
Can't blame her for that.
I know, right? But her political advice is really interesting. She told him, don't let them filter you.
What does that mean?
She's basically telling him to not let those consultants and media people and pollsters control what he says and how he acts.
So be himself.
Exactly, which fits perfectly with their whole message about being authentic and not listening to the establishment.
It makes sense.
He connects this advice to both his and Trump's commitment to being genuine and not being afraid to say what they think, even if it makes people uncomfortable.
Authenticity is a big deal in politics.
Huge. People are drawn to candidates who seem real and unscripted, even if they don't agree with everything they say.
It makes them seem more trustworthy.
Yeah.
So by focusing on how authentic they are, Vance and Trump are positioning themselves as these outsiders who aren't controlled by special interests or worried about being politically correct.
And to wrap things up, Vance gets surprisingly personal. He starts talking about what inspires him.
Oh, that's nice.
And guess who takes center stage?
His family.
His kids. He tells this really sweet story about how excited they were when they were traveling during the campaign and how they were just amazed by how beautiful and diverse America is. He talks about deserts in Arizona, plains in Texas, mountains in North Carolina. It's clear that their genuine appreciation for the country really tickled him.
It's a classic way to connect with an audience.
Totally.
Bringing up your kids always makes you seem more relatable.
For sure.
And by talking about his family, Vance comes across as more human and grounded.
He ends by saying that seeing America through his kids' eyes fills him with hope and optimism for the future.
It's a positive message.
Yeah, it leaves you feeling like there's a chance for a brighter future.
It reinforces their whole idea of restoring America to its former glory.
Exactly, and making things better for future generations.
Smart.
So there you have it. J.D. Vance is definitely not afraid to tackle the tough issues. He's bold, he's provocative, and he's definitely setting the stage for a new kind of leadership.
This speech was more than just a list of policies. It was about his values, his vision for America, and a call to action. It gave us a glimpse into the mind of a leader who's determined to reshape America, for better or for worse.
That's the big question, isn't it? How will Vance's vision affect different groups of people, and what will the long-term consequences be?
These are questions we all need to think about as we move forward in this new era of American politics.
Vance has laid out a clear plan, but the road ahead is bound to be bumpy.
Only time will tell if his vision for America will become reality.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into J.D. Vance's CPAC speech. We hope you'll keep thinking about these ideas and keep searching for different perspectives. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.